I'm Rob.
And I'm Bill, and you're listening to the Teach and Live Abroad podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Teach and Live Abroad podcast, where we delve into, chat, and discuss all things teaching and living abroad. Now, this episode kicks off a 3-part series of episodes I did with 2 university professors and 1 language school teacher who all live in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, which is where I live. And the questions I posed to everyone were, how does a blended classroom look in your current teaching position? And is the word blended already an obsolete term for classrooms? And when I say blended, I mean classrooms or teachers that use digital tools mixed in with quote-unquote traditional ways of teaching. So we started off our discussion talking about this word blended and has it already changed, what the meaning of this is. And then part 2, I asked everyone, what are some of the digital tools that they implement in their classrooms and how do they use them? Needless to say, some fantastic insights and ideas were shared. I picked a lot up from all these interviews. It was very enjoyable. And before we get started, let me mention that today's Teach and Live Abroad podcast episode is sponsored by EITESLjobs.com. EITESLjobs.com, an online resource for posting teaching jobs, finding teachers, or finding a teaching job overseas. That's EITESLjobs.com. And also, if you like the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, if you can. And be sure to follow us on our Teach Abroad pages on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So let's get started. My first interview was with Dr. Curt Beaudin, who is a professor in the English department at the National Kaohsiung Normal University in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. It's like the Teachers College of Kaohsiung. And again, this is part 1 of a 3-part series of 3 interviews that I did. Please enjoy. And I'd like to welcome a friend of mine who is a professor at a university in Kaohsiung, Dr. Curt Beaudin, and he's going to talk a little bit about his applications of tech tools in the classroom. Welcome, Curt, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Robert. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Is this your first podcast ever?
This is my first podcast ever.
Inaugural podcast for you. Great.
Woohoo.
So tell me, why don't you just give a little introduction of yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm a little introduction, so we'll go all the way back. I'm Canadian, and I moved to Taiwan about 18 years ago. And to try to keep things brief, I got here, and when I first arrived, I got into the Bushy Band scene. So I taught in cram schools for about 3 years or so to start. And then after that, I got a job teaching in a private elementary school. And that's kind of where I started to actually fall in love with teaching. I liked it's a little bit more high level stuff with those kids. They had more English classes per week, and I really started to enjoy it, but I didn't really see a long-term future there. So I went back to school and I did a master's in TESOL in a local university here. And then when I was done that, I told myself, that's it, no more school, time to get a job. But after about a year and a half, I decided might as well try to finish the whole process. So I went back again and got a PhD in TESOL again. And luckily for me, like, it's really hard in Taiwan to find full-time jobs here. But I got lucky. My school was hiring right around the time when I graduated. So basically like a month after I graduated, there was a job opening and I went and interviewed and got a full-time position in the English department there. So for the last 2 years now, I've been a full-time professor in the English department at the university.
Yeah, and I remember I was kind of with you for that whole process. And I remember saying to you, like, man, you're working really hard, Curt.
Oh, yeah.
But I was so impressed. I was like, you're really just, you went full in.
The classroom, and then, at night in the library, it was pretty crazy. Yeah.
But it really paid off for you. And like you said, in Taiwan, it is difficult to get a full-time professorship at a university. And you were fortunate. You got in.
super lucky. Like this is a whole other road we could go down, but like I always give this lesson for my kids. It's also about, building relationships along the way. And I know like because my professor was one of the influential professors in the English department and my advisor for my PhD. And I remember she told me that when she went in to say, okay, everybody, Curt's applying, she said to me right away, the people in the office were like, oh, we like Curt. He's always so polite when he comes in the office and stuff like that. I'm like, see, those just being nice and smiling and saying thank you and please and stuff like that. That stuff kind of pays off later.
A smile goes a long way, doesn't it?
Definitely. Sorry to go off topic a little bit.
No, that's great. I think I'd love to do another show about, I think that your career path into teaching is quite interesting. We can go into that maybe on another show, because
Sure.
you did come here to Taiwan with really no intent of making this your career.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And now you're here, you're in it for the long haul. So
sure. Yeah.
So let's get into it a little bit about
Okay.
The teaching that you do and the technology that you use or don't use in the classroom.
Okay.
And we talk about a blended environment. So, and I was introducing before in the show that a blended environment is, you're using some traditional teaching methods, but you're also using these great tools that are out here or devices to help you teach and help the students learn. Do you think at the university you're in now, you're in that environment?
Well, it's kind of hard to define actually. And I know we talked about this before off the air, but when you talk about blended in today's world, it's kind of hard to define what does blended actually mean.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was a good point you made. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
To say that, I think it's impossible that nobody uses any technology in the classroom, like just notebooks and pencils and stuff like that. But I would say before this COVID outbreak that we have, I would say that I wasn't really using too many tools at the university level. I mean, obviously you use your standard software presentation and you have computers in the classroom and things like that. But to me, that just seems like regular university. It's been like that for years and years now, most classes. As far as online tools, I know at my school, they've always had a learning platform, but it was really hard to use in the past, like wasn't very user friendly. But they have updated that. And I don't know, I think people just slowly start to use these things. But since the COVID outbreak, everything's kind of gone upside down. And so actually now you realize just how much you rely on the technology, because without it, there's just no way things would function. So as soon as the outbreak hit, you realize, oh yeah, we use the learning platform to upload our homework, to give announcements to students and to assign homework. And now we've got, of course, the Google Meet meetings and things like that. So I guess my answer in a roundabout way is we use the technology a lot in the classroom already, maybe just didn't realize how much.
Yeah, and I think COVID, Taiwan's COVID situation came a lot later than the rest of the world. And when the rest of the world was going through it in 2020, everybody was saying everything that you read was like, oh, it really pushed not only schools but also offices to realize, okay, we can rely on technology a little bit more than what we were doing, and it pushed people really to learn and adapt a little bit. Yeah. And I think teachers are part of that.
Yeah. And I think actually we're lucky in Taiwan because we got to watch the rest of the world go through it and we saw what they're doing in schools. And then when it came to us, we already knew, well, there's kind of a pathway already there, right? Like I saw all of my friends back home using Google Meet or Zoom or whichever platform they're using. So we kind of knew instinctively, okay, well, classes are canceled. So let's send the announcements and the links out and let's start running our classes online. And I think one of the benefits of this is kind of an interesting thing that I realized is when I teach a regular class, like one of the courses I teach is freshman pronunciation. So it's not a very exciting class. We basically go through the vowel sounds and consonant sounds and intonation and all the things that they should have learned as children, but we reteach it again at the university level, but more like theoretical and we read some literature about where sounds are produced and things like that. So anyways, at the end of class, you always ask, are there any questions? Is something difficult? And it's always no. Like you might get 1 out of 25 students come up at the very end of class and very quietly say, hey, professor, I don't know how to make this sound, or something like that. But now that we're doing these online classes, I give them a Google form at the end of the videos that I upload, and it's full of questions now.
Isn't that interesting?
Professor, I don't understand how to make the and sound. How do you reduce the sound and things like that? And I'm like, well, I should be giving these Google Forms every week then, because that's the way for them to interact. They're too shy to say it out loud, but it's another avenue for them to give me feedback. So I think that's something I'm going to use in the future. Regardless.
That's really positive to hear that, because if you've ever taught in Asia, that's definitely an Asian cultural thing.
Sure.
That you don't ask questions. You don't query in classrooms usually. There's a big shyness there to doing that. But in private, yeah, you will get that. Hey, that's really fun. That's a great story.
Yes. So I think for myself, what I'm going to do is, because the semester is almost over here, but I think in the future, regardless, I'm going to create Google Classrooms. And even if we're having class in the classroom or online, I'm going to utilize this technology a little bit more. And that way, I think, the Google Forms are there. You can put your homework and your videos directly inside the Google Classroom. And I think that will be a good system, because it's really messy right now with the different platforms in Google and in trying to keep track of everything.
See, so that's really interesting. So this is a perfect example of you maybe pre-COVID, pre-online teaching, and now you're like, you know what, this Google Classroom can just become part of my normal teaching routine from now on. Definitely. For every class that you do.
Yeah, I think as a teacher, that's what you have to do, right? You have to adapt all the time. I mean, any teacher who's not trying to improve their classroom is maybe already stopped, and they're not trying to be
in the towel.
Better. Yeah, I think you have to always try to make your classroom more efficient and more interesting for the students.
So in addition to, those Google presentation kind of software that, and in some of your students, they use those for presentations as well, right? Like that's part of, sometimes they have work to do. They're going to utilize that, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you try any other like games or activities? Do they work with the university students?
Actually, surprisingly, university students love games, and is something that I didn't think would be the case. But I find that they're so used to more traditional teacher-centered classrooms. So it's usually just sit there while the teacher blathers on for 2 hours, and then basically they either fall asleep or they listen, but it's not very exciting. So if you do something where they get to get up and actually interact, they're usually quite positive to it, unless it depends on the English level as well. But I played something in class last week called lyrics training. I don't know if you've ever used it before.
Lyrics training. Okay. Like lyrics, the song lyrics.
Yeah. And basically they have all the pop songs. They have thousands of songs on there. And it's a game, right? So the singer comes on, it's a YouTube video, but it's also a gap filling exercise. So they'll sing the lyrics, you have to listen to it, and then you basically fill in the missing word, or you have to type in the missing word. That's the more challenging level, or choose the word depending on their level. And they love it. Like they said they all went home and they were all practicing online, and we did it in class. And I played Ed Sheeran Perfect, because I knew they would know that song, right? And the whole class was singing, and it was a lot of fun, actually.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, those kind of activities actually can motivate those quiet classes. You think they're quiet, but it motivates them.
Yeah, you just have to find the right task to get them to not be quiet, because they're regular. Well, I say kids, they're not kids. They're 20 years old, but they're just regular 20-year-olds. They're not quiet by nature. They're just quiet in the classroom.
Right. Now, how about you have a lot of experience with younger learners as well, like elementary school. So how does it differ? And I guess you weren't really doing a lot of online work when you were teaching the younger kids. Yeah. But do you have any experience or like kind of things that work with those kinds of activities or tools? Like how does it differ from the older students?
Sure. Well, I'll answer the differ part first. I think with the older students, you don't really need to if it's in the classroom, it's one thing, but if you're talking about like their independent learning, the older students will go find that on their own. Like they know all of the sites already where they can interact with native speakers online, or they can do pronunciation practice. It's rare that you can show them something they haven't already heard of. But with the younger kids, of course, you've got parents at home that don't want them using computers too much and things like that. So, but I'm actually doing a research project right now on CLIL. CLIL is a hot bilingual teaching philosophy that the government is going to implement here. It's basically teaching content and language at the same time without boring you too much and getting into details. But it's kind of where my research track is right now. And I've been teaching once a week in an elementary school, 5th grade or 6th grade students, and they have iPads there. So we've kind of restructured the lesson plan to incorporate these iPads. And one of the apps that I really like is Quizlet. Now, Quizlet is I think most people know what Quizlet is.
Right. Quizlet's quite popular. It's been around a while. Yeah.
Sure. But it's really good, like the app, because you can make flashcards, like online flashcards. And the app itself will allow you to upload the pictures that go on the other side. So if I type in the word water, for example, you can also record your own voice on there, and you can put a picture on the other side. And then when the students use the app, so let's say you give them 10 flashcards, for example, when the students go in, they can tap on the flashcard and then they can hear your voice, they can see the picture, but it has a self-test function. So if they're not able to actually say the word, they swipe to the left and then they collect on the left-hand side. And then if they swipe it to the right, then that word's done. They've already finished it. So they can keep going through the flashcards until they've got all of them on the right-hand side. And then after that, then they have a learn function. So they kind of test them. They test them on listening or comprehension or meaning. It doesn't matter, whichever function you use. And then after that is some games, like matching games. And the matching game is match the word to the picture. And on the iPad, it works great because they just use their finger and slide it over like the picture and match to the word, but they time it. So if you're all connected to the same network, you've got 125 kids all competing against each other to see who can get the fastest score. So the interesting thing is I get these emails at like 10 o'clock at night saying, Johnny C is now the fastest person in grade 5. So they're going home
and doing
it, and they're practicing trying to beat each other. So every time they get the high score, I'll go in and try to beat them so that I'm always at the top, right? So they're always trying to beat the teacher's score. And what I found is at the end of these units where I'm using Quizlet to teach the vocabulary, is you've got the lower level kids in class who can say all the words, and they can write the words too. And we didn't even like ask them to write anything, and we didn't ask them to spell, but now all of a sudden they can spell these words. And these kids are a lot more motivated. Like usually with children, if you get the really low level kids in the public schools, these kids don't even go to cram school. Right, they usually can't learn too much, especially in terms of English, because they're usually really overloaded with Chinese, right? But all of a sudden, these kids out of nowhere are like spelling words. And I'm like, my goodness, where did that come from?
Wow.
So it's really, really promising results.
You're really giving those students more exposure to the language, and also at their pace and their time.
Sure.
And if they're motivated to go in and play that,
right.
Great.
That's right.
Yeah. You're not forcing them to sit in a class and go through flashcards only. I mean,
you made a good point with the pace. Pace is it, right? You let them sit there and they learn the cards on their own. That's the most important part.
Yep. Yeah. So everybody feels comfortable. They don't feel stressed or pushed to do that. Right. Yeah. The only thing is that's great. And this is in a public school, right? Where they don't, it's a Chinese speaking public school.
Sure.
English is a special class that they're getting right now. Yeah. So the only thing it's dependent on having a device.
Absolutely. So I guess like these things maybe in the future will be more common in the homes, but one of my teachers, it's still an interesting tool.
One of my teachers at my language school, he uses his pad to teach and organize his class on the projector, and he has an extra one, and he will during break times and stuff, he'll let students do activities like that on the pad.
Mhm.
They share the
Yeah.
pad. Sometimes
Cool.
they'll do a reading level. They'll read a book and answer some questions, like one of those
Yeah.
um, reading level book accounts. So yeah, it does help a lot, especially with language learning. It can really
Sure.
speed up the pace a bit.
You really have to motivate the kids, right?
Yeah. So also that's good. Now, and we talked a little bit about Google Classroom. So Google Classroom is going to be probably your pick to move ahead
I think so. Like,
platform wise.
I think so, because right now, like, we have our own learning platform at school, but there's some challenges, because if you're using a Google Forms, then you still have to link everything, right? Like, you're creating links through Google and then uploading them into the platform, and so you're kind of jumping back and forth between the two systems all the time. So I think Google Classroom is going to be something I implement, because, like I said, I think I'm going to add these Google Forms at the end of all my classes from now on, to make the students give me some kind of feedback. And then I can keep that stuff all right in there, plus keep attendance and things like that. So,
and I think also there's a lot of great apps out there or programs that you can use. I was looking at one called Flipgrid, where students make their own presentations.
yeah.
And then it uploads. I think it can upload to Google Classroom bulletin
Oh,
board
really?
as well.
Okay.
So you have this community of the class and people doing their presentations, whatever the assignment was. It could be very short or it could be longer. Yeah. So I think, I think Google Classroom's great tool and platform, and you can just build your classroom with this. It's really great. Yeah.
Actually
really
reminded me of something too, that with the university students in today's classroom, back when we were in university, we're getting up there a little bit in age, but when we did presentations, we would always make our PowerPoint and use the software, and then maybe we would have our little recipe cheat sheet note cards or something like that, right? And we would read the note cards while we did our presentations. What I found today is, first of all the students write their notes on their cell phones.
Yeah.
So they all get up there and use their cell phones as their note card. But none of them use PowerPoint. They all use the free Google Slides now.
Yeah, wow.
Because they can get, they're much cooler, right? They have all these different templates you can get online, and they can get them for free. And then they don't need to pay for Microsoft Office. And it's quite convenient, right? Nobody uses a USB, memory stick. No memory sticks in class anymore.
That's gone the way of the CD.
Yeah, everything is all online.
It's accessible.
They all go into their email, their Google Drive, and so everything's connected that way. It's quite convenient.
Yeah, we use a ton of Google Slides in our school. It's really wonderful. And I have one teacher who's I don't know, man. He can make games. He's pretty good with the computer. He can come up with games and things and make crosswords and stuff with all those Google tools. Awesome. I'm like, so hey, man. When I was in college, by the way, there was no PowerPoint.
No PowerPoint. Actually,
I was
thinking about that. I was like, wait a minute, maybe I didn't use PowerPoint. That might have been my master's time.
Yeah, and I went to a couple of summer programs. My parents sent me to summer programs for study skills and stuff. And I remember being taught to write on note cards, those paper note cards. And if you had to write a paper and I had lines and columns of them everywhere.
Yeah. Handwritten everything. Yeah.
But why not have it on a cell phone? It makes perfect sense. It's just a digital card,
it just looks funny though. They're all standing up there with their cell phones in their hands.
Yeah. Awesome. So, okay. So, here, my last question here was, do you see a time when maybe, there's no more paper in the classroom, there's no more books that you're holding and everything is going to be just communicated digitally, even though you're in person in the classroom. I mean, maybe that could end in a sense too, but
maybe
how far away is that, or is it going to happen?
I think that's a two-part answer. I think the textbook part is definitely, I can see that going away. I think there will always be a place for textbooks for the students, to read. It's kind of like if you're doing research, you need to read a journal article. I don't think those things will ever go away. It's just up to you whether you want to print it or read it on your device. But as for the teaching part, I have 5 courses this semester and I only use a textbook in one of them. And the other 4, I just prepare the material and present it through some kind of presentation software, because it's just a boring way to teach, to have the students look at their textbook and you look at your textbook. There's no way to like focus on specific information other than to say, okay, everybody, page 25, second paragraph, line
right.
3. It's just a really mundane way to teach, and the students hate it as well. So
that wasn't that long ago
in
either.
the classroom,
that was the norm not that long ago.
My grad school experience is all like that, just sitting around the table going through the textbook.
Yeah. But certainly when you're doing like a reading, some kind of reading lesson, and you want to kind of focus on one particular sentence or even a phrase in a sentence, boom, you can highlight it. It's up there, break it down. Everybody can see it.
Definitely. But the other part of that question about not being in a classroom, I don't know. I think the classroom atmosphere shouldn't go away. And this COVID outbreak has made that more clear to me. I think online is just not the same. I mean, maybe I'm too old school, but like when I do a Google Meet with my students, the first thing you see is 44 black pictures because nobody turns their camera on. Nobody wants to turn on their microphone. So you've got this screen of little black pictures, and you think to yourself, okay, so basically I'm just talking to myself anyways. But at least in the classroom, you have that more interpersonal, you can walk up to students and you can call on them. And I don't know, I think it's easier to get their attention in person than it is online.
And with young learners, I mean, it is such young learners and teaching a language. It's all about moving them around and doing things and being socially.
They need to interact with each other, right? Like,
the
whole idea of learning English now is like communicative based learning, right? They need to interact with each other. They need to use the language. If you're doing that online through headsets, this is not going to work the same.
Yeah. I think as like maybe a kind of a booster or like reinforcement, it's good. You might have an online half an hour with a teacher somewhere, but as a main class, I still think it's not there yet. So, hey, Kurt, go ahead. And last thoughts? Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, I think with older students, it's okay to upload like a lecture, like if you're teaching writing or something like that, and they can go back and listen to it. I think that's okay. But if there's any kind of communication involved, definitely not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of, I believe in that flipped model away for older students, let them do the lectures and stuff at home. They can listen, they can watch it, they can slow it down, they can watch it several times, but let's apply some stuff in class if we can. So.
Sure. Definitely.
Anyway, Kurt, it's great talk. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. It's really informative. Good luck. And I got to have you on another time.
Sure, man.
Have just a Dr. Beaudin show. We'll talk about linguistics and all those
all that exciting stuff. You'll lose all your listeners.
No.
All right,
okay.
Robert.
Hey, cheers. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Bye.
And that was Dr. Curt Beaudin, professor in the English department at the National Kaohsiung Normal University in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Thanks a lot, Kurt. Some great insight there on how Google Classroom is now going to be a part of your in-person class teaching, how something as simple as Google Docs got his students to open up and start asking questions about the class a little bit privately, but they still did it, and how Quizlet is helping his students go home and practice on their own and practice at their own pace and come back knowing not only meanings of vocabulary words, but also how to spell them and write them. Thanks a lot, Kurt. Again, we've got 2 more interviews later in this series with 2 more English instructors from Kaohsiung, Taiwan. And once again, I'd like to thank EITESLjobs.com for their support. EITESLjobs.com, a source for finding teachers or finding your next teaching job abroad. And don't forget to rate us and review us on your favorite podcast app. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Our page is called Teach Abroad. And I'll put some of these resources in the show notes for you to look up yourself and to learn a little bit more. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.